Hello, legends. Today, I catch up with the amazing Lisa Jones, founder and CEO of Shecom, Australia's largest women's business community for brand-led businesses, B2C businesses. Lisa really has created something essential for women in business in this country, a community of other women that they can be part of and to help themselves grow, to normalize the craziness of business. In fact, our businesses are very, very similar. We're in communities for business owners and we're very, very similar people. Like we were talking about a lot of things that we both had a lot to say about. For example, great lessons in leadership, choosing your lane, how to get your business off the ground and how to identify success. Like what is success for me? Honestly, I learned so much from Lisa. She even solved problems for my business. So I'm sure you'll love this conversation. Enjoy the show. Well, you went recently to the BOA Women's Supper Club?
No, I didn't.
You weren't there?
No.
Oh, I thought you were there.
No.
Oh, you should have. I heard it was amazing.
I would have actually, I looked at it, but I live on the Goldie, so it's hard to get to events down here.
That's right. And what are you doing in Sydney at the moment? Are you here for?
We've got a bunch of things on this week, but yesterday I was a keynote speaker at the MailChimp conference, and today and tomorrow there's a big exhibition at the ICC called Online Retailer, and then Shecom has a party tonight for 100 female founders. So we've got about, 6 events over 3 days or something crazy.
Yeah, and then you've got the BOA event recorded tomorrow.
That's it, we do.
Oh, wow, so busy. You're really, like Shecom is very, I know it's the largest women's community for online retail. Is that correct?
Yeah, like D2C product brands, female founders.
Mm-hmm. And so your focus is very much in the like online retail space or direct to customer
100%
space. And so all these speaking gigs, they're all in that kind of.
Yep, exactly.
world.
Sometimes we verge over more into maybe where enterprise level businesses might be hanging out, which is where Online Retailer and Retail Fest, and we went to Shop Talk in Vegas this year. They're all primarily designed for medium to enterprise level brands, but we mainly hang out with small businesses, but we still go to them to find best in class of all kinds of software and the ecosystem that our clients can access, and we bring it to them.
Yeah. We do kind of similar things. Like we basically just talk to business owners all day and bring them together.
Yes.
Like is a lot of what Shecom does. I know it's a lot of also education and events and inspiration, but a lot of it's community.
It's actually primarily community, and I never want to lose that focus. That's what is at the heart of what we do, and then it's just the layers of things we add to it.
I've never been to any of the conferences and not conferences, like the conferences. You know, when you go to Vegas, what's the one you just said? Shop Talk. Why do you actually go to those things? Like, why do people go? What are they?
Well, we primarily go for partners. So a lot of our partners here in Australia are US-based, software platforms, etc. So we go to meet with their head offices, but we also go to look for new software that our clients could be using in their businesses. And I'll explain that by saying that when you're in e-commerce, there's an entire ecosystem of software that can help a business grow. And often here in Australia, we don't hear about it. There's super cool, low-cost, AI-driven pieces that can automate or make things that we do in our businesses much quicker and more efficient and therefore grow our revenue. So we at Shecom kind of consider ourselves almost like a modern union for women. So we're out there looking for the things that they need, but they don't have time to go and look for.
Yeah, okay, so you guys need to be in the know.
We're in the know.
Yeah, so when a new thing comes out, your community is therefore in the know.
100%. That's why they're behind us, and even amalgamating rates. For example, this is one of my big things at the moment, is that we have Australia Post, who dominate the Australian logistics market for e-commerce brands to send their products to people's homes. We like to see some new players, and we'd like to bring amalgamated freight rates to our small businesses, the kind of rates that enterprise level normally get that the small business doesn't get. If we can amalgamate the 10,000 women in our community into one freight band, we can get access to much cheaper rates. So that's one of my legacies I'd like to leave, but we can apply that to just about anything.
We can even help with that. We can throw in a lot of people.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah, I do. I mean, obviously,
we could
all our
amalgamate
databases
BOA and Shecom.
Yeah, BOA. I mean,
Cub.
there's a lot more B2C at BOA than there is at Cub.
Yep.
Cub is a lot more B2B.
Yeah.
And we do have a lot of like online retail, but it's not. They're not all, obviously. It's not a huge number, but I think BOA is a lot more. We could definitely amalgamate. That would be cool.
I reckon. Legacy. We need to leave a legacy.
Imagine disrupting like Australia Post.
Can you imagine?
That'd be cool.
That makes me like lie awake at night excited.
Yeah. Is that your like current mission?
One of my things. I have many. I have a brain that doesn't turn off. So it's always thinking about what angle I could take that would help women. And that's ultimately what we do.
And so what drove that passion? Like, how did you get into SheCom?
Look, I think it's hard to know where to start this question. I think I had a very successful corporate career in a very male-dominated industry. So that probably started the idea that I wanted to be an advocate for women. And I'm not a feminist on any level. I just really enjoy working with women and brainstorming with women. It's very different than when you have men in the room. So I think that was probably the first piece. And then the second piece was building my own companies and being stuck with male mentors and male investors and a male co-founder. And I felt it hampered me a lot. So I think I was very hungry to grow my business to support women. And I had a not a very pleasant experience of 8 years in a domestic violence marriage. And I think that was a really big impact for me also on becoming nowhere near as selfish and arrogant as I used to be, and a lot kinder and more empathetic to other humans. That experience really rounded out all my edges and made me a much kinder person. So I think that forms a really big part of what I do at SheCom, is supporting and uplifting other women and assuming that everybody else is not having a shiny life perhaps on the outside as they are showing the world, and making sure that everybody's loved.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, you've given me a lot to unpack there. But, I mean, I want to start with, you said I'm not a feminist on any level. What do you mean by that? Like, what do you believe, like, feminism is? And
Right.
and how do you believe what you do is kind of different from that?
Well, I love men. I think that probably firmly says I'm not a feminist in that sense. I admire a lot of men. I'm happily married. I'm not somebody that's out there in any way trying to insinuate that men are, a less clever species or anything like that. I just feel very strongly for me that women supporting women is a really powerful thing. I think it's women standing arm to arm and getting each other and uplifting each other is a really powerful movement, and that just automatically puts men to the side, and that's kind of where I come from. It's nothing more or less than that. There's nothing to read into it.
I agree with that because, like, at Cub, it's obviously men and women. That's kind of the whole point of Cub. It's the next generation of it's changed the face of kind of leadership communities in Australia from the old men's only clubs to Cub. So it is obviously very diverse in that front. But even at Cub, we still have sub-communities that people can be involved in to help them connect with others that are similar to them. So, like, we do have a women's community. We do have a young members community. We do have, like, a golf community. And, like, I've had discussions with people about it before, whereas they're like, oh, why is that just for women, or why is that just for whatever? And my answer is always the same. It's like, sometimes it's nice to just be with people that are similar to you. Like, it doesn't mean you need to always be with them, but it definitely makes things easier sometimes. And having that mix is super important. And, in SheCom's case, that having SheCom and having that community there, like, the rest of their lives is already mixed, and most of it is, a lot of it's also men, because men could be their mentors or investors or, all these things. So it's like, well, wait a second, I do also want to hang out with a lot of business women that are in a similar situation to me. And so it kind of gives them that, having both is important.
It is, and the most astonishing thing happens when women discover SheCom and come to one of our events, and you can see it on their face when they realise that all of the other women in the room are them. So we have this saying, like, I am you and you are me, and there's just this light bulb that goes off where suddenly it's not the husband or the children or the parents or the girlfriends who don't understand what it's like to have an e-commerce business, because it's super complex. It's exhausting and it's overwhelming and it's relentless, and it's a struggle at times. So what we do at SheCom that's so different is not only putting all these women together, but we do it in a really vulnerable way. So I have it's a really interesting thing that we have no trolling, no bitching and no judgment in our entire community. We have a very safe community, and I've just talked about it last week with somebody, and they were like, why do you think that is? And I think we came back to the fact that it starts at the leader. And for me, that's how I behave and interact with others. I'm a cup half full gal. I think everybody's great until they prove me otherwise. And that warmth, it just flows through everything we do. So the other aspect of the women only piece that's really important to mention is that there's no competition, and equally there's like this safety to share what's actually happening. So I'll give you an example. We run a 2.5-day conference every year. Ours is coming up. It's in September at the W Brisbane, and we close the door during conference sessions, and there's no men in the room. Mostly, there's occasional waiters or a photographer or a cameraman, but largely, even the sponsors, our partners who have an expo area outside, don't send men into the room, and we close the doors and we don't film it. And it's designed to be that when we're talking about what it was actually like to build a business and where we fucked up and where we lost money, we actually say it as it is, without any of the superficial, hey, this is the Instagram story where everything was perfect and I was an overnight success, which is bullshit. And that's actually what we do so really, really beautifully.
That is really what you're describing to me is laying the foundations for a culture that is conducive towards relationship building. Because even at Cub, we're so similar actually, our businesses. Even at Cub, and I want to ask you how you create that culture. It obviously stems from you, but are there systems you use to actually, kind of educate new members and things like that? But at Cub, we always tell people, you got to be really as authentic and genuine as possible. If you got an issue, you got to say it. You have to be honest. When people are honest, they connect. It's when people young men always is more common for them to do it. But I've got this and this, and we've got 200 staff, and we're blah blah blah.
Ego.
Yeah. But and good, they should be proud. But it's not conducive to relationship building. No one's going to like you
it's
and
because
connect
you're putting
with
a
you.
barrier up when you tell a story that comes from ego, whereas when you come from heart, there's no barriers.
That's it. It's the barrier. The same barrier that someone would put up on a social media platform when they make it look glamorous and easy.
I think there's 3 things we do really differently to answer your question around why we have this culture. And I think it comes from 3 of our mission pieces at SheCom. One is playfulness, firstly, because life can be droll and exhausting, so we like to have fun. Secondly, we have a sense of warmth in everything we do. It's conversationally in our copy, it's at our events. I encourage everyone to come and have a hug, say hi, find other women. We have what's called She Pods. So any events we run, we put 5 women in a group on WhatsApp before the event if they choose to become a member of a She Pod, and then they often become friends for years afterwards and chat every day. And then the third thing is, and I think this is a really important piece, especially for a women's group, is that it's professional. We're actually here to make money, to take our businesses seriously. It is not a women who lunch club. It is not catty or superficial or some of the other things that I occasionally see at women networking things where they're not taking it seriously. We're very professional in what we do. We're not here for the sake of it. We're here to build profitable, scalable businesses. And they're the 3 things we combine that seems to have a little bit of a magic set of ingredients.
And you mentioned, you said something interesting, which was that you went through, you experienced a terrible, I think you said 8 years in a domestic violence relationship, but that made you a kinder person.
Yeah, no, it's odd, right?
I've just never heard anyone say
no, look, I've done a lot of deep work. I come from a beautiful, loving, kind family. I'm educated. It made me deeply ashamed that I ended up in that kind of relationship. And for a long time, I hid it because how could I possibly be this stupid to have married somebody that could be behaving like this? It's actually quite shocking, to be honest. That would probably be the primary piece for me for a long time. And then when I came out the other end of it, you're stripped back on, and unfortunately I had a business that I co-founded with him, so that exacerbated the stress in our home because we worked together as well as we're raising children together. And I honestly have done a lot of psychology and counselling post leaving that relationship, mainly so that I never experienced another one again. We want to make sure we don't repeat our patterns in life, and unpacking how I ended up there and how I could see, I suppose I like to see everything. I like to see the silver linings in everything. I think life can be really tough if we don't look for silver linings even in the really shitty things. And I definitely acknowledge that I am a far nicer human at the end of that. And yeah, I think that, look, it's a really shitty thing for any woman to have to go to. So instead of being stuck in fear and trauma that it would ever happen again, I feel really empowered having come out the other side of it.
Yeah, and it also kind of sounds like you've really consciously chosen to find silver linings from a bad situation. And then when you do that, it's almost like, well, I am a better person now because I was able to overcome it, and not just overcome it, but I was able to overcome it, and I feel like I'm stronger and I'm a even better person in the sense because I kind of forced that I made that happen rather than, because I imagine it would be very easy for people to to shrink, maybe, like, to feel, I don't know, but
letting fear make them, well, look, if you've been in a domestic violence marriage, you'll realize that you have to diminish yourself in order to survive. That's like one of the primary things that happens to women. They shrink, they shrivel, they diminish because that's the only way you can survive. And I suppose I would like to think that maybe my strength is that I've actually risen dramatically bigger than I was before the relationship, not in ego, actually the opposite, just in showing up in the world and being the happiest, kindest version of myself that I could be. And that is, I suppose, the ultimate revenge.
And do you think that if you were to go back now, you would see the writing on the wall?
100%. I feel like I have a radar for it now where I can sniff it a mile away. Even in women, men, business people, it's, narcissism is prevalent across the world in every culture. It doesn't matter, whether it's male or female. It's not age. It's not religion. It's not, social upbringing. It's actually just a personality trait that exists everywhere. And I do absolutely see it now. And yeah.
I reckon I've met 3 narcissists my entire life, and I know exactly who the 3 are, and now I do. Now I feel like I can pick them, and they were all 3 like people that came into my life somehow. One was actually a girlfriend back in the day, but you can see their patterns. Like they're all the same in my head. They're in the kind of same bucket. So when you kind of come across one, you do, and they can be like, good looking, and they can be like really clever and like
often
really,
very successful people because they can be very covert about what they're like behind the scenes. And I think that's the piece. I know a lot of women who've left relationships with narcissists, and almost all of them I've been quite shocked that the husband, or as you've said, sometimes the wife, has been narcissistic because you don't see it on the outside often.
Yeah. And I read once that like the best way to tell if someone is like a sociopath essentially, or like narcissist, is that they're not able to hold long-term relationships. And so if they don't have long-term friendships, like that is supposed to be a really big sign, because in their mind, everything they do is for themselves. They're never reciprocating. They don't even know how, and don't care to. And so eventually, if you're in a friendship and it's not mutually beneficial, eventually you're not going to be friends with that person, because this relationship is not like like a business relationship. It has to be mutually beneficial. I can't just be carrying one, or one can't just be damaging me. And so what happens is they just always lose their friends. But because they are often attractive, or they very charismatic was the word I was going for. Thank you. They do pick up new friends very quickly, and so they've always got these best friends that like are new. Like they act like they love them and they've been best friends, but they've known them for like a month.
Yes, it's true. And also, what you said, yes, but the other layer to it is that shiny people who are like doing well in life. First of all, it is attractive to them, and then it drives them mental because it makes them feel crap about themselves. So that's when the relationship will break down, because they'll be like, well, actually, I don't like that you make me feel bad because you're prettier or hotter or clever or sexier or smarter or wealthier than me. So in the end, that'll be the thing that'll undo them.
Yeah. And so where were you born?
I was born in Melbourne.
Oh, you're a Melbourne girl.
I am.
And so what made you move to the Gold Coast?
I grew up in Brisbane for high school. My dad was an Ansett pilot, and so when Ansett collapsed, they moved and we moved, and yeah.
And did you, was business something that you kind of always wanted to do, or was it something you fell into?
Honestly, I spent most of my 20s climbing the corporate ladder, dreaming on the side about a food business. I would every 6 or 12 months, I would reinvent the menu, and it would go from like a pop-up Vietnamese, iced coffee bar to food home delivery that are like home cooked meals, or like I would constantly be rotating, and I would literally be researching recipes and writing food lists. And I've always been entrepreneurial, but I know I come from a family that are employee mentality, not entrepreneurially minded, and that just wasn't encouraged. And I think even now, my mum and dad, God bless them, I love them so much, but I think they still think I might have to go back to getting a job one day. And I'm like, that ain't ever happening ever again. But there's just that mentality. So I think I was too scared. And then when I was 29, I met my ex-husband, and he was already working for himself, and 3 months later I quit my job, and I've never worked for anyone else since.
Isn't that amazing though? Isn't it amazing how much the people that you surround yourself with can have an impact on you, whether it be positive or negative? I mean, it's just, if you see that something's normal, then it becomes normal and you do it. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like, if no one in your family is in business, like that person, it takes a lot more courage for that person to start a business than, like, for myself, business was almost the way I was supposed to go. So like it felt normal.
Daniel, I'm so envious of you, because over the years, like now I'm 46 this year and I'm on my 7th company, but I think I didn't even start really until I was 30. What if I'd been in an entrepreneurial family? By the time I was 15, I was probably starting my first business, and how much more money and success I might have now at this point in my life if I had started early. Yeah. I get jealous.
Yeah. Starting early is one of those things that everyone I speak to, like yourself, for example, that didn't start early, always says like, oh, you know, I want to start early. And everyone that does start early says the benefit was, and is still in business then after, always says the benefit was that they didn't have any like responsibility. Like they might not have had kids, or they might not have been married yet, or they might not have had a big mortgage, or like, you know, so it was like, if I fail, it doesn't really matter.
Not as much to lose.
Yeah, I can do whatever in life. But like for me, I started Cub when I was 23. I started a restaurant, actually, which we don't talk about much on this podcast. It's too embarrassing. When I was 21, it's called shout out to Bastille Dining. It was on what's the road? I can't remember. It was in Drummoyne.
Blocked, that part of your life, blocked.
Yeah, I'm not a huge hospitality business fan. Love hospitality as an industry for myself as a consumer, but and feel bad for that industry right now. But anyway, what was I talking about? Being young. I was very, like, if I look back at myself then, I was very immature still. You know, I wasn't a very good leader, and I wasn't a very good business person yet. And I was like, you know, I wasn't there. But then, you know, and like, would I be those things now? But maybe I wouldn't, even if I started now, because I didn't have, like, I would just be learning how to be those things. So, you know, part of me is like, well, starting young, you know, you are still a bit like, not stupid, but you're still young. You know, your vision of the world is very, very limited. But as you get older, you're a bit better at people. You understand yourself better. You understand the world better. But then you're kind of cutting yourself short because, you know, starting earlier just gives you a head start. Like,
well, and it's interesting because it could be said that it would be easier not to have the pressures of mortgages and kids, because I can attest to how stressful that is when you know that your income is low this month, but you know you have mortgage payments and school fees, and that stuff keeps you awake at night. It's horrible. However, I flourish with my back against the wall as a businesswoman, and you know, I have 30 or so staff on my payroll at the moment, and that is a big payroll every month for what is essentially 100%, you know, owned by me business. In other words, the buck stops with me if I can't afford to pay the salaries, right? So that's an enormous pressure, but equally that's what drives me. So if I didn't have, I suppose, those responsibilities, maybe we would be more flippant and less committed to our businesses.
Yeah, like you almost have to succeed.
Right,
like
have
you
to.
have to make it work.
Oh, no, I have to succeed. That stuff keeps me awake at night. There ain't no choice.
Yeah, no, like, and what that kind of shows though is like what we're talking about. There's just no only path. There are so many different paths to success. Like it depends on you, depends on your life and your family, where you're from. Like it doesn't mean anything. There are people that, you know, like you can start a business and build a really amazing life for yourself that's really purpose-driven, that contributes to the world, that gives you a lot of personal freedom and ownership over your life, makes you a lot of money so that you can help people and enjoy your life as well more. Like you can do that at any time in your life. You know, it doesn't really matter.
Agree.
Yeah. I think that's why communities are so important, and why, like, I'm such a big advocate for business communities, because especially if you don't come from a business family, you know, if I join SheCom, well, all of a sudden, even if I don't have a business yet, you know, all of a sudden, well, business is normal. Like
you're part of something.
Yeah, this incredible woman, she's just like me, and she's got a great business. So like, it's obviously I can do it too. Like,
And I think it
normalizes.
It comes from a place where people yearn to belong to something. I genuinely believe this. We yearn to belong to a family or a partner or children, and I think we yearn to belong to something that is bigger than the sum total of ourselves. That could be having a purpose in this life. It could be part of a community. It could be part of a team. It could be any version of that. But I feel we're not isolated and lonely humans. We actually yearn to be part of something. And I think when you find something to be part of that feels good, I think that changes our entire outlook and our ability to show up in the world with a smile on our face.
So tell me the very start, right? So you've got 10,000 members, you've got 30-something staff. But what about day one? So how did you actually get this off the ground? Because building communities, and believe me, I know how difficult it is. Building communities is incredibly hard. It's one of those things everyone's like, oh yeah, I thought of doing that once. Like they always say it to me. And I'm like, okay, but it's so, I know how hard it is. What was day one like? How did you actually make this? How did you succeed?
Yeah, okay. It's a good question. The context needs to be set that I had just left my nappy brand. So I built the world's greenest nappies and wipes brand. And I actually, through my divorce from my co-founder, our investor, who is Justin Cameron, who had built Surf Stitch into a really successful e-commerce empire. Justin was our investor, and then he purchased the whole company. So I had just recently, like 3 months into a new relationship with my now husband, and was exiting the previous. We'd been separated for about 2 years, but we were still co-running the company, trying to find a way forward where neither of us wanted to leave the brand, but it wasn't going to work. So I'd come out of a fairly traumatic period, and then I knew, because I gravitated to coaching, people would come to me and ask for advice. And so I knew there was a new career for me. But when you get swept out of something and you feel a little dejected, it's difficult to see what the next thing is, the next right thing. And so for me, it was like stumbling in the dark. It was like, well, I'll start with coaching because that's a way to earn an income, and I'll put my foot in the water. And so I did. And for about 12 months, I coached a bit more broadly. And this is a really important piece in building a community. I was a broad coach because I had a trades background. We ran a 19-team trades business, and then I had a nappy brand, which was D2C, and it was wholesale and e-commerce. And so I was a very broad coach. And then I remember specifically one day sitting there with a business mentor, and he said, Lisa, stop being a general practitioner and start being the boob doctor. He said, have you seen what cars the boob doctors drive? I said, what are you talking about? He said, they're in the Porsches and the Lamborghinis. You need to be a boob doctor. I was like, dude, you need to explain that. He's like, stop coaching everybody and pick a lane and own the lane. And that's when everything shifted for me. And I think that's where the community piece comes from. So I identified that I wanted to and felt most confident coaching women only, and then specifically women building product brands. And then it literally was like wildfire. It just exploded. And I think when you start, I think there was a few catalysts to that. One was knowing your lane intimately and very publicly declaring your lane. So having very clear and concise information about what problems you solved and for whom. And that makes it easy for them to identify and say, well, that's for me. Using the language that allows people to feel seen and heard and know that's their people, that's the first piece. And then, oh God, I don't even know what I was going to say next. It's gone.
Well, we were talking about keys to why, like how you actually made this successful, what day one was like. And I mean,
that's right. The other piece, sorry. Then the second piece is that I chose to be really vulnerable in my storytelling. And I think that's a really important piece of community as well, because humans, not only do they like to be part of something, but I suppose to some extent, they will distrust before they trust. So we need to let them know, like, and trust us. And to do that, we need to let them see us. And I've always been a fan of, and I suppose a lot of women who've been through domestic violence won't acknowledge it publicly or talk about it. And I suppose it's a complicated story for me because I still co-parent my daughter with this particular person. So technically I probably shouldn't tell my story publicly or I'll end up in court again. But I also choose to take the lid off the shame and tell the story as it is. And I think it isn't about him, actually. It's about me and my journey through this. Therefore, that story that I tell allows women to decide if they like me or don't like me. And I'm not for everybody because I swear and I'm loud and I'm very, over the top. And that's actually just who I am. But by letting people see me, that allows them to choose if they want to follow me or not. And then it grew with like wildfire.
And just on that, like if you were being suppressed, for example, for 8 years and you weren't able to be your big, loud self, like once you are, you probably scream from the rooftop.
Yes. And thank God I have a husband that adores who I am now and never tries to diminish me on any level. In fact, he quite happily wanders around behind me, making sure I'm hydrated and motivated for my next thing I have to go to. So nobody in my world diminishes me anymore.
It just shows you, though, like how important choosing your partner in life is.
It's everything.
Yeah, like you really need to know what you want from life. Like what is your most kind of important thing, and maybe the second and third as well. Like, and choose someone or find someone that, makes those things possible.
Agree. And that they come in packages you don't always expect.
Yeah, it's probably true. You got to look for long-term success rather than short-term, I don't know, what would you call it?
Lust?
Yeah. But yeah, that's a good word. And what you just described is something that so many early stage businesses struggle with, which is knowing your lane.
Exactly.
Yeah, choosing your lane, knowing your lane, whichever one. But it is like basically owning a niche. Like, this is mine. I'm an expert in this for these people.
Yep.
And
then learning to communicate that clearly. That's the piece that a lot of people fail to. So they might know their lane, but they don't know how to use the words to convey that to the rest of the world. And that is probably a predominant thing I see with women-founded e-commerce brands is they created a product because they solved their own problem. So they actually often are in a niche and they have a lane. They just don't know how to share that message with the rest of the world, and it fails to execute a lot.
But so how did you learn how to do that? Or how can people do that?
Well, look, okay, I would surmise it as simply as this. Humans are inherently selfish. And so when you're talking about your end user, they actually, contrary to what I just shared, they actually don't really care about you. What they care about is themselves and the problem they face. So I call it a transformational sell, and I say you don't offer features and benefits. What you do is you say, I know what your problem is. I know how it feels to have your problem, and I've solved your problem. Would you like me to help you fix your problem?
Wow, that was really good. I was writing it down. That's a great way to put it, though. So I know what your problem is. So, and then the question is, choose the problem that you need to know the problem you've solved.
It needs to be genuine and authentic, because if you're trying to sell something in a space that isn't, it'll come across as inauthentic, and people still, even if you can enunciate it clearly, they're still not going to trust you. It has to come from a genuine place.
But it's also hard. Like I'll tell you, like something we've always suffered with at Cub. It's like, well, okay, what is the problem we solve? Because we are a community, right? So, and different people get different things from the community. So is the problem, and people, like, for example, when people join Club, well, yes, they probably are going to get business from the club because they're meeting business people all day and they build relationships and they end up working together. So is business
connection?
Well, we have relationship building, like connection, like you build friends with people, and then knowledge, like they learn a lot. So it's like, you got three. Here are three problems we solve, and then you've got another problem, which is networking typically sucks. It's a bad experience, and we've made a beautiful experience. So is that the problem we solve? So then you.
Typically, most businesses will have at least 5 things they could say, exactly as you've just said. And I think often it's then about testing the different testing those different pieces and seeing which has the biggest cut through with your market. So often there'll be one which won't often be the one you think it is that has the biggest cut through. That becomes your hero banner piece, like your headline. Then you'll weave the other 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 through other pieces of copy and other landing pages or other CTAs. And so it isn't necessarily that you have to pick one and forget the rest. I believe there's often just one. And I'll give you the perfect example of this. When I built a nappy brand, I made it the greenest in the world. And that took me 2.5 years and a lot of money to partner with biotech companies that were doing really cool resins and re-engineer a nappy. It was a big deal. And I assumed, stupidly and blindly perhaps, that therefore the number one problem I was solving was the eco aspect of a nappy. But actually, humans, with regards to sustainability, are nowhere near as driven to purchase sustainability as we would like them to be. So that ended up being like number 5 out of our list. It was actually health of baby was number 1. So like not wrapping your child's private areas in a plastic bag, ultimately, and not very clever way of saying it, was actually far more important to them than how long the nappy took to break down in landfill. So it's not always what we as a business owner think it will be, and the only way to know that is to deeply test and measure your market. So in that case, we spoke to over 30,000 people at 5 baby expos. Well, more truly, we gathered a database of 30,000 people who entered at 5 baby expos around Australia in a 6-month period. They entered a giveaway with us, but many of those we actually spoke to and showed the nappies and talked to and had a team of 10 on each stand. We worked really hard, but we wanted to understand, what are their motivators? What do they want to pay? What do they want us to call it? What did they, deeply measuring your market and then repurposing your message in their words, not your words. That's how I teach it now. It's like, just because you say the water bottle is tall and silver and does this, doesn't mean that's how other people looking at it will choose words to say it. So when you're measuring, you need to write down the exact words they use and then reframe it.
Wow. Honestly.
How long have you got?
I feel like I'm writing too many pages. But it's true. It's everything's just so true. And sometimes the key to a business success isn't the stuff that sounds hard. Like, I've got to hire people, I've got to get accounts on my taxes. What do I like? There's all these difficult things, but they're things that you can actually, other people can do for you anyway. Like your accountant does it for you, for example. But like the really big problems, the really big things that separate like a successful business from not, they actually sound simple, but they're not. It's like, what is the problem I solve and how do I communicate that? You know what I mean? Like, no one's sitting in business or thinking about starting a business being like, oh my God, I'm so scared about how to figure out the problem myself, but they're thinking more like, oh my God, what if I hire people and I can't pay them?
Right. And then the other layer to it, which is even more complex, is that once we do this once, we can't assume that's it forever. We need to constantly optimize. Like we change our messaging every 2 to 3 months at SheCom, and we're constantly evolving it because things move as you grow as a business. So just because you come up with the copy once and somebody writes it for you doesn't mean that's it.
Yeah, it's got to evolve. And also, I literally had this conversation yesterday with the team, with our leadership team, is that what happened this month or what happened last month is different now to this month. And what happened this month last year is different now. What was like, the world is changing so rapidly at the moment that as businesses, we're literally on a month, we're basically evolving live.
Right.
What you say, how you communicate, what people need to know in order to buy. These things are changing so, like, honestly, monthly. Like, it is a live process where, especially if you're on a sales team or you have a sales team or you're selling yourself, like having your finger on the pulse of your customer and their experience currently within the world is essential to basically to be surviving right now. Because remember, like, from 2015 to like 2019, things were quite stable. Like, the world was essentially somewhat stable. Like, the environment wasn't freaking out all the time. But then from 2020 to now, like, it's like every month it's just been like it's like at one point the business playing field was this table. It's like hard and flat. And now it feels like we're playing in the ocean with just this wave, like never ending waves.
It brought fear into the business world because we all of a sudden had to question, well, hang on, do I actually still have a business? And I think that fear hasn't left yet because there's still waves, as you've said, of like, is it a recession? Are we worried about money? Is discretionary spending reducing? Like, that fear, I think, is probably the bit that is making us all feel like we're constantly bouncing in business and perhaps a little bit unstable. But I agree, things are moving very quickly, and that's why we as business owners need to always be adjusting course.
And so, I mean, a key part of your success then was, knowing your lane, communicating it correctly and being authentic. How did you actually get your first members? Like, how did you actually start growing the community?
I did a couple of days of a virtual workshop. This was at the start of COVID, and it was with a business mentor, and I literally followed his handbook of how to start posting and where to share stories. And I started from my own Facebook profile of like saying, here's what I'm doing and who would like to come and join my new program that's launching next month. And I think I had I remember about maybe 2 to 3 months in, I had a first $10,000 month. And then about 3 months in, I had a $37,000 month on my own, like no staff. This is just me and my own. And I was like, literally had to like lean back against the wall and hyperventilate. I was like, oh my God, this shit is going to fly. This is amazing. So it's looking for proof. I talk all the time about MVP with business owners, like minimum viable product. If you're shouting from the rooftop and nobody's buying, then you haven't met MVP yet. Your product, you have to tweak it and keep moving it a little to the side, a little lower, a little higher, maybe go with an altogether new version, right? And so when you start seeing flow and traction, I mean, last week on my podcast, I had a lady on who's gone from 0 to 8 figures in a year with her product. And I was like, that is MVP on steroids. I have never seen a product fly that quickly. Like that is when you know you've hit the mark.
And what's your podcast called? So the listeners may as well hear it.
She Talks E-commerce.
That's a great, everything you do also has a great name, because even SheCom is just a really great name. Was that your corporate background?
No, nothing to do with that. But I've discovered in my business journey that you can have the best product in the world, but if you're not clever at marketing, no one's ever going to buy it because they're never going to hear about it. So I would say largely I didn't start out to be a good sales or marketing person, but I've had to constantly hone my skill to a place where I now feel like it comes naturally.
And were you naturally a good leader, or is that something you had to learn?
No, I've always been a leader. I was the kid at school who no one liked because I always saw things. I was older than everybody else in my head and my mind, and I hated school like a lot of entrepreneurs hated school. And yes, the leadership piece has always sat there.
I swear, we're so similar. I reckon we're the same person. Like, even when you forgot what you were talking about before, that always happens to me because I'm talking, but I'm thinking at the same time. And then my thoughts went further than my mouth. And I'm like, oh, shit, what am I saying now? Like,
always.
It's so funny. I hated every day of school. I said it to my wife yesterday. I was like, I literally can't think of a day I liked. Like,
no, school is so deeply traumatic. And I'm watching it with my 13-year-old at the moment who hates school too. And it's like, we feel different to the other kids. That's the first problem, because we're just not sheep-like, we don't blindly follow. Secondly, school is stupid. The stuff they teach, it's not very helpful, and it's taught in a way that is dogmatic, and that is not how our brains work. And thirdly, it's long and boring. And so I have a very quick brain, and that's probably a piece.
And rules. Too many rules.
My God, I hate rules. I'm not a rule follower. I think a lot of leaders are similar. But I think that we need to, as people, we constantly need to question stuff and move quickly. And that's how I've always built businesses. I move at lightning fast speed. And school is the antithesis of all those pieces.
And so, I mean, so naturally, you obviously had like just inbuilt into you a lot of self-belief. And confidence, and you're naturally a good leader. But when you hired your first people, let's say it's SheCom, like, because you're on your own, it's a big thing. When you hired your first people, have you had to evolve as a leader to go from 2 people to 30?
Oh, I've evolved so many times. I don't even know which one to mention to you right now. I certainly, in my first businesses in general, I made lots of mistakes as a business owner. And I've learnt a lot of things the hard way. But I believe myself now to be a pretty good leader. I feel like I've landed on some really core pieces for me as a leader. And the kindness and empathy are really important, as is professionalism. And I struggle, probably the bit that I maybe haven't mastered yet is that I have a really high attention to detail as a business person. I think you have to if you're successful in business. Every little piece counts. And therefore, I don't micromanage. If anything, I'm probably the opposite, where I entrust people too heavily. But I've just recently had a thing in SheCom where I've had to go back into all of the different parts of my business and take over a little again, because I kind of let it go too far, and I stepped into the CEO and the strategist, but also the face of going out there to get more publicity and things. But thus I let parts of my business not be seen by myself, and that was an error. So I think I maybe haven't landed entirely yet on where this is, but it's somewhere between not micromanaging but also leading. There's like a grey area.
Yeah, I think the difference is more that leadership is not management. And so sometimes like me and you are literally the same, because I'm not a good manager, but I am a good leader. But when you lead with not good management, and to be a leader anyway, you need to manage, because even if you're not the manager, you need to be managing the manager, making sure that you're reviewing the data with them to make sure, like, okay, marketing's performing well, so like retention's good. But my old man said to me once, because I was saying to him, I was bragging, I was like, Cub works on its own. I really don't have a day-to-day purpose in the company, and it still does really well. And he said, yeah, it might do that for a few months, but you don't look at it for long enough and watch what happens. And the guy's always bloody right, because I went in to Sydney and we were just doing a debrief on the data and things, and we just found a lot of like management issues. Basically, things weren't happening as they should have been. And I was like, oh, damn it. Because I'm always trying to challenge him and he's always fucking right. So I was like, anyway, but it's exactly what happened to you. It's like you can't take your eye off it.
Right. And the layer for us, and this is every single business owner who's listening right now will be nodding their heads when I say this, but we got so busy strategizing and building and being clever and getting really broad that we forgot to fill our top of funnel. So for about 6 months, maybe 8 months, we actually just kind of forgot about acquiring new people in our community. And as one of my beautiful business mentors, Tony, she says, Lise, there's only so many times you can shake the tree before there's no fruit left to drop to the ground. And that's literally, our sales then started to not necessarily decline, but they didn't continue to grow. And then I was like, oh my God, what the fuck? And then we were like, there's no top of funnel at the moment, Lisa. So it's so easy to take your eye off the pieces. But I think for a lot of business owners, if we keep our eye on always having new audience coming in to buy from us, then we can get other things wrong and it's more forgiving than that one. That's a pretty big mistake to make.
Never screw up your sales. Never screw up your sales. Because when you have no money, then you're fucking you've got a problem.
It's exactly
the other
right.
ones you can clean up, you can sweep them under the rug and sort it out. But when there's no money, you can't sweep that up.
It's a mistake I'll never make again.
But the thing though is that what we're describing in terms of how we are is not necessarily all entrepreneurs. In fact, I know so many that have micromanagement issues, like they manage too much.
Right.
They can't let go.
Control freaks, I call them.
That's another problem, because then they're never focusing on, they're never working on their business. They're working in it all the time, and they create bad environments for their team who like feel
totally. Nobody wants to work for that person.
I can't remember where I read it, but it was recently, and it basically said that the number one way